Senate Bill 4 would allow state and local law enforcement to arrest and deport people whom they believe cross the border.
The legal back and forth over Senate Bill 4 continues in Texas. A federal appeals court granted a temporary stay of a lower court.
Those in court, we also saw this appeal coming. The U.S. District Judge David Ezra hinted toward his decision during that hearing.
He make it clear, that SB 4 don't belong to the state. This is not what we wanted. That is a discriminatory, racist legislation.
The legislature cannot create its own crimes relating to unlawful presence in the country.
Border Patrol agents say they processed nearly 11,000 migrants on Monday. That's about 4,500 more.
SC halts immigration law. Big news from the legal world. Texas was gearing up to enforce this tough new immigration law called Senate Bill 4, but then the U.S. Supreme Court swooped in like a superhero and hit pause on the whole thing. Let me break it down for you. Justice Samuel Alito, one of the big shots on the Supreme Court, stepped in and temporarily stopped Texas from putting Senate Bill 4 into action. It's like hitting the brakes on a speeding train. This means that the law won't kick in until at least March 13, giving everyone a breather. Now, what's all the fuss about? Well, Senate Bill 4 is a pretty controversial piece of legislation. It gives Texas state officials some serious powers when it comes to dealing with migrants and refugees who enter the country without proper documents. We're talking about arrest, prosecution, and even ordering people out of the country. It's like Texas was gearing up for its own mini immigration showdown. But wait, there's more drama. The Justice Department, led by none other than Uncle Sam himself, filed an emergency request with the Supreme Court. They were like, hey, hold up. This law is causing major chaos and could mess with our relationship with Mexico big time. And you know what? The Supreme Court listened. They hit pause on the law to give themselves some time to figure things out. So what's next? Well, the ball is back in the court, so to speak. The Supreme Court has to decide whether to let Senate Bill 4 go forward or put the kibosh on it for good. It's like a legal tug-of-war with Texas on one side and the federal government on the other. Senate Bill 4. All right, buckle up, folks, because we're diving into the wild world of Senate Bill 4, aka SB 4. This Texas-sized piece of legislation has got everyone talking, and for good reason. Let's break it down. First off, what's the deal with SB 4? Well, it's basically Texas saying we're taking immigration enforcement into our own hands. This law is like the Lone Star State's answer to the immigration debate raging across the country. It's packed with provisions aimed at giving state authorities some serious muscle when it comes to dealing with migrants and refugees who enter the country without the right paperwork. Now let's talk about the nitty-gritty of SB 4. This bad boy gives Texas state officials powers that would make Superman blush. We're talking about the authority to arrest, prosecute, and even order folks out of the country if they're suspected of entering irregularly.
SB 4 would give state law enforcement authority to arrest and detain people that they suspect.
Senate Bill 4 would allow state and local law enforcement to arrest and deport people whom they believe cross the border.
Make it clear, that SB 4 don't belong to the state. This is not what we wanted. That is a discriminatory, racist legislation.
Well, more than 100 demonstrators took to the streets in El Paso against the controversial Senate Bill 4.
Border Patrol agents say they processed nearly 11,000 migrants on Monday. That's about 4,500 more.
It's like Texas is setting up its own immigration enforcement agency right on its doorstep. But what does all this mean for the people caught in the crosshairs of SB 4? Well, it's a mixed bag to say the least. On one hand, supporters of the law argue that it's necessary to crack down on illegal immigration and protect the state's borders. They say it's about maintaining law and order and keeping Texans safe. But on the flip side, critics are sounding the alarm bells loud and clear. They say SB 4 is a recipe for disaster, especially for migrants and refugees trying to make a better life for themselves. With state authorities wielding such broad powers, there's a real risk of hurt and discrimination. It's like painting a target on the backs of vulnerable communities and saying, "Come and get us." And let's not forget the bigger picture here. SB 4 isn't just about Texas flexing its muscles. It's about setting a precedent that could ripple across the country. If Texas gets away with it, who's to say other states won't follow suit? It's like opening Pandora's box of immigration enforcement, and nobody knows where it'll end. So as the debate rages on and the legal battles heat up, one thing's for sure. SB4 is shaking things up in a big way. Whether it's for better or for worse, only time will tell, but one thing's certain. The eyes of the nation are fixed firmly on Texas, waiting to see what happens next.
6:48 is your time. A federal judge has blocked a Texas border law from going into effect next week.
The White House saying that it's the Senate's fault for not, moving through, and the House's fault moving through on that border bill.
He tried to make a decision as soon as possible so they would have time to appeal before that law goes into effect.
Let's get it done. And by the way, speak to your agricultural communities and ask them if they need temporary work.
Legal battles. All right, let's roll up our sleeves and wade into the legal battlefield that is the fight over Senate Bill 4 in Texas. This law has sparked some serious legal fireworks, so let's break down the legal tussle. First off, there's been a flurry of legal disputes swirling around SB4 like a Texas tornado. Federal courts have been front and center in this showdown, with everyone from district judges to the big shots at the Supreme Court getting in on the action. It's like a legal rodeo, with each side trying to wrangle control over immigration enforcement in the Lone Star State. Now let's talk about the arguments flying back and forth in the courtroom. On one side, you've got Texas officials and their supporters waving the flag of state sovereignty. They argue that SB4 is all about Texas taking control of its borders and cracking down on illegal immigration. It's like a rallying cry for states' rights and local autonomy.
Will wake up to the fact that it's an election year. We'll get more dialed in.
Legislature cannot create its own crimes relating to unlawful presence in the country.
Operations along the Texas border. All of this in addition to the hundreds already deployed.
Senate negotiators who spent months working on a bipartisan border bill had that proposal collapse.
They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
But on the other side of the ring, you've got a coalition of opponents raising some serious concerns. They're sounding the alarm about SB4's potential to trample on civil rights and lead to racial profiling. They argue that immigration enforcement is the federal government's job, not Texas. It's like a David versus Goliath battle, with civil rights advocates taking on the might of the state. And let's not forget about the big guns, the Supreme Court. This legal showdown has made its way all the way up to the highest court in the land, where justices are grappling with some weighty constitutional questions. It's like the Super Bowl of legal battles, with the fate of SB4 hanging in the balance. So as the legal wrangling continues and the courtroom drama unfolds, one thing's for sure: the fight over SB4 is far from over. With so much at stake, from states' rights to civil liberties, the outcome of this legal battle could shape the future of immigration enforcement in America.
And we're protesting against it, and we want the state of Texas to eliminate this before. I mean, that is...
But the problem is now is the safety and security of families. This is the #1 issue across the entire country.
The legal back and forth over Senate Bill 4 continues in Texas. A federal appeals court granted a temporary stay of a lower court.
State versus federal authority. Let's dive into the age-old tug-of-war between state and federal authority when it comes to immigration enforcement. This debate is like a never-ending game of chess, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. Here's the lowdown. On one side of the ring, you've got the states, led by Texas in this case, flexing their muscles and shouting, "States' rights!" They argue that they have the authority to take action on immigration within their borders, especially when the federal government isn't doing enough. It's like they're waving the banner of local control and autonomy, saying, "We know what's best for our state." But on the federal side, you've got Uncle Sam and his posse, reminding everyone that immigration is their turf. They argue that the Constitution gives the federal government the ultimate authority over immigration policy and enforcement. It's like they're saying, "Hey, we're in charge here. States can't just go rogue and make up their own rules." Now let's talk about the constitutional implications of this showdown. At the heart of the matter is the concept of federal supremacy, the idea that federal law trumps state law when there's a conflict.
Those in court, we also saw this appeal coming. The U.S. District Judge David Ezra hinted toward his decision during that hearing.
Precedent of allowing individual states to resist any federal laws they don't agree with.
Laws in recent American history on Monday, it allows police to arrest migrants suspected of crossing the border illegally.
This principle is like the referee in the ring, keeping things in check and ensuring that the federal government doesn't get sidelined by the states. But this isn't the first time we've seen this dance. The Supreme Court has weighed in on similar cases in the past, setting some important precedents along the way. One of the most notable rulings came in 2012, when the court struck down key provisions of an Arizona immigration law that tried to give state authorities more power. It's like they were saying, "Nice try, but federal law wins this round." Impact on U.S.-Mexico relations. Alright, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. Senate Bill 4 isn't just shaking things up in Texas. It's sending shockwaves across the border and beyond. First up, let's talk about U.S.-Mexico relations. SB 4 has the potential to seriously strain the already delicate relationship between the two countries. Mexico isn't exactly thrilled about Texas taking matters into its own hands when it comes to immigration enforcement. They see it as a slap in the face and a breach of trust. It's like trying to build a bridge while burning the one you already have. And let's not forget about the implications for federal immigration enforcement efforts in Texas. With SB 4 in play, federal agencies like ICE could find themselves butting heads with state authorities. This could lead to confusion, conflict, and ultimately a breakdown in cooperation. It's like trying to run a marathon with one foot tied to a rock. It's not going to end well. But the ripple effects of SB 4 go beyond just Texas. This law sets a dangerous precedent that could reverberate across the country. If Texas gets away with it, other states might follow suit, leading to a patchwork of conflicting immigration laws from coast to coast. It's like trying to navigate a maze blindfolded. Chaos is pretty much guaranteed. And let's not forget about the human cost. SB 4 puts migrants and refugees in the crosshairs, making them easy targets for discrimination and hurt. It's like painting a target on their backs and saying, "Come and get us." This isn't just about politics, it's about people's lives and livelihoods hanging in the balance. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.